Erica, you are the highlight of my day. You really are. Thank you for being in my day today. I appreciate you making time.
Oh, thanks to you for having me. I mean, I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you.
I have decided that I wanted to make certain I spent time honestly just having those moments in life that I think are worthwhile. And a lot of that for me is just having those conversations and talks with people whom I know are doing something good in the world and they are trying their best to make things better in their own way. And I love that because I keep running into people who they have this feeling that there's maybe not so much they can do. They can kind of feel a
Hmm.
little bit disempowered, or maybe they're trying so hard to make things better in some ways. And you keep running against these brick walls and you think there's not much you can do, but I think there's always something. And I love talking to people who are finding that something in their lives. So I appreciate that. Thank you for making time.
No, thanks to you, and I'm really happy if I can also, get some good thoughts and feelings also out of this. So it's not just a conversation about facts, but also like a way to, brighten up your day and hopefully the day of people that are listening.
Yay. One of the reasons why I want to chat with you is not just because you're an awesome human being, because you are, but it's the fact that you combine so many different things. You do so many unique things, and somehow you put it together into a very
I try.
I don't know how you firstly find time for everything, but you seem to do a lot of things very well. So you're like head of growth at Movement Characters, right? And so you're doing your, marketing, your like acquisition of people and all that kind of stuff. That's your thing there. And you do that well. And you also are very much a very vocal advocate and ally for various groups and such on social media. We're based in Finland, and that you are a person who is very much a very vocal advocate for immigrants and for different people who are having a more challenging time. And aside from that, you also do like you're a writer, you're an author, you are a runner these days as well. Like, so maybe the question is, what don't you do? That's probably the quickest way of like, like putting it
Oh my
together.
God.
Yeah.
This is a question that lots of people ask me, but I think that the real answer there is like going with what is comes natural to. I'm
Mm,
somebody who is really, like really good at reading, getting information,
mm,
writing very, very fast.
mm,
So anything that is like on my strengths is kind of easy. And then it's easy to tap into all this knowledge that I've acquired through the years. So it does not
mm,
require that much time out of
mm,
me because it's mostly things that I know very well. So
mm,
it does not take a lot of time for me to think about, hey, how would I help this person, or like what would they need to learn or hear right
mm,
now? So the reality is that a lot of the things that I do are kind of complementary and they don't, they rely on my strength. I think what is very much harder to do, or something that I think about from time to time, is what would you do that is outside of your comfort zone, or that is not
mm.
something that you are naturally comes easy. And I think that that's something that has a lot of different value for me. I think it would be much harder if I was doing things that would require totally different skills that I usually use. But because it's in the
Mm.
same realm, it kind of comes easy. So it's
Okay.
way faster and easier for me to just like send a LinkedIn messages with like a bunch of resources that I think would help, or like having a conversation and try to help somebody with the
Mm,
specific things
mm,
compared to, I don't know, for example, things that like one thing I've been thinking a lot about is like uh, working more with like youth. There, I think it would
mm,
be completely different and it would be such a huge learning curve.
mm.
And I've been thinking like, hey, is there a way that I could do it? Or do I have, that is something that I think would be completely different. It would require so much more time and resources.
All right. I'm thinking about one of the most humbling experiences I've ever had, and that was teaching like high schoolers English. It was so
So
humbling. It
hard.
was so, I felt like I went back to high school. Like, I remember actually I dropped out in high school, like when I was, I don't know, 16. So for me, it was probably because of that, maybe doubly emotionally, taxing. But I was there and I was working with these kids who were, I don't know, they were super they had personalities. They had some very strong personalities that can develop when you're like 16, 17 and all that. And they were in this one program that was like to help them graduate, the last chance kind of program. So they kind of dropped out in various other schools, etc. And I thought I was going to go in and make the biggest change. I was going to be that person who's going to help these kids. And I got so humbled. Those kids put me in my place. They sure did. And I realized that, that cardinal rule of like education, teach your students, not your lesson. So you focus on the kids, you come in with this lesson plan. You think you're going to do all these things, but it's just theory, and it's all about the human beings that are in front of you. We made it through. We all survived, and my kids all graduated. Yeah. They all graduated. I'm very proud of them.
That is amazing.
But it was something where like I definitely caught my mom crying a couple of times.
I feel that like that would be me also. So
yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, it's like, do I stay in my lane? Let's put it this way. Or do I try to do something completely different? And it's always this like push and pull in between, like, I think this is where I can contribute the most, but also maybe it would be good to learn how to do other things as well.
I love though that question though about how do you approach life in general in that sense. Are you going to dwell on your comforts and your strengths? And you are doing, I think you're a good argument for doing so, because look at all the things that you are doing, and you're doing these things so well. You are making such a positive impact in people's lives. People feel seen, heard, and supported because of you existing in your strengths, right?
But it's also hard because you think, hey, is it really making a difference? I think it's a huge struggle to think about. Okay, let's put it this way. First of all, like, social media activism, let's call it this way, has a very limited impact. I think we have kind of overestimated a lot the benefits of things like representation, which is important, don't get me wrong. But still, I want to see actual change. I want to see actual action. And that is really hard. Sometimes I feel like, hey, this balance also putting a lot of maybe effort in sticking on social media, which I still think is important. But then actual change probably comes from getting your hands dirty even more. I had this conversation a lot thinking also about things like politics, because you have this problem with like, hey, ideologically you are in one place, but actually politics is there to compromise, and you would have to, in a way, accept things that you are not super happy about in order to push forward some other things that you really want to push forward.
Yeah.
And it's a constant, like, it's not like I have answers or solutions. I'm just, I think it's action matters. Yeah.
These are good things to think about, but what I started thinking about recently when it comes to these things is, you think about what's your bandwidth, and then you want to try to make the most impact with the bandwidth that you have. For me, I'm not a social media activist, not because I don't care, or not because I don't think it's valuable. It's because for me, I also think about like my mental health, and I realized that like being on social media a lot is not like the best thing for me.
No.
And if you're going to be an activist, you have to be
honest.
I mean, you have to be like constantly linked in. You have to be connected all the time. You have to respond to people immediately. And for me, that's not where I have that bandwidth. That's not for me. So I will allocate 15 minutes a day. And so everything you see online for me, like it's either pre-scheduled. I have like an hour, and I'll put these things out and I'll pre-schedule it out, or it's within my 15 minutes a day. And
to be honest, that's very smart. Because it's not good on your mental health, I think, for anybody to be on social media a lot. And it's like this constant maybe assessing, like, what do I feel like? And of course, it's also a privilege. I'm in a very privileged position in which I can just decide, like, that does not have enough value in that sense of my life if I decide to not post for a month, or like if I decide to post every day, or depending on how I feel. Of course, for people that need to be on social media and like because of their work or the other things, or they are in a position in which speaking up is really a matter of life and death, then it's a completely different thing. But for me, obviously, this more privileged position in which I think about, okay, like, do I feel like I have something to say? No. Or do I feel like this is affecting my mental health negatively? Then I can just not do it. And it's a huge privilege.
I think one thing I don't want to minimize is the power of a voice. Okay.
Yeah.
I have become aware of people and different struggles in the world, different challenges and different realities, and different things that I could do to make things better because people have shared.
Yes.
And so I would never ever discourage anyone for speaking up. I think that's a great thing to do, insofar as that is what you can do, do that and share and give your perspective, give whatever insights that you have. But understand that people have different things to offer. So for me, I think I work better in some ways. I think my impact is a little bit better when I can provide, data or insights, when I can be able to share different kind of things. I can research certain kind of things, say, hey, look, this is actually, have you considered looking at it from this particular way? I think my impact is better when I have conversations with people, more or less individually. And I think I've seen more people change their perspectives and actually change their actions as a result of that than if I had allocated like that 30 minutes to talking to everybody en masse. I don't usually see that action coming from that. And it could just be how I communicate and what I do. But when I'm trying to make an actual change for something, then that's usually more like a one-on-one situation for me.
No, and I agree. And, it's hard because in a way to be able to listen, you already have to be in a listening phase. And obviously social media algorithms are designed so that you only hear from people that think in the same way as you. And it's like whenever it scrolls over, it's extremely hard to change anybody's mind on social media. Literally, I would say it's almost impossible because it's not the place where you can have this kind of face-to-face conversation or like really a dialogue. So it gets very difficult. I still think it's very important. I agree. Like in my, for me, it was huge when I started being on Tumblr. I started I was exposed to concepts that did not exist when I was growing up in a very, there was no internet. I only spoke Italian at the time. Like feminism was a bad word. Like we didn't really understand anything about racism. So being online and actually reading perspectives from other people completely opened my mind to, hey, why did I never thought about this? Or I should learn so much more about this, and listening really opened my mind.
Yeah.
But it's it's kind of difficult because of the nature of social media itself. I really start to think that social media is kind of a negative for the world, to be honest. Which is, and as much as I'm a user of social media, I'm a creator of social media, definitely. But more and more, especially when I look at the impact on children, I start to see mostly the negatives. And the fact that we are outsourcing our information to social media. Like nowadays, people get their information from social media and not from other sources. We have seen how negatively that goes and how much we are all stuck in our little bubbles. And, you don't really realize, let's put it this way. For me, based on my social media bubble, I was shocked that Trump won the election. Because I would only see content from people that were 100% yeah, Harris is gonna win, and I was so sure. So we are fall prey to it.
That's the thing. I had this weird feeling when I saw when the election was happening and such. It reminded me so much of what happened when Hillary Clinton was running, And I was like, this, down to the SNL kind of skits and such, and the comedic aspects. And I was like, this is it feels exactly like that to me, where I think people are having their victory lap and they're celebrating prematurely, and they're like, yes, you feel the way I do. Great. We're voting the same way. Great. And they're talking to the same people, and you realize it's like not talking to the other people is a massive failure in terms of communication for when you're trying to persuade people, but then also just the idea of, not understanding, not empathizing, not being able to relate, not knowing what those fears are that are driving the behaviors behind people, not addressing those fears adequately. There's a lot of failures in that particular instance. Yeah. But social media is a thing that can make you feel like you are the world. And that's the weirdest thing, where it connects the world and simultaneously excludes it,
it's really, it's really weird. And I don't know. So in a way, I think LinkedIn is a little bit different because your network is not necessarily composed by people that think like you.
Yeah.
So in that sense, the impact, and I've had like conversations with people who think differently. And because it's also on LinkedIn and people have their name and surname in company, it tends to be, less abusive. So in that sense, I still think there is value in having these conversations on LinkedIn. However, let's not kid ourselves. Of course, LinkedIn has been very open about the fact that they don't promote this type of content that is about, for example, social justice or calling down injustice or anything like that. They just want you to share like tips about, I don't know, achieving X more revenue by doing X, Y, and Z. Like literally, they don't want, they call it politics. Of course, it's so much more than politics. I hate when human rights, when human rights issues are considered politics. I think that is absolutely insane. But it is designed into the algorithm itself. So let's not. It's not the free marketplace of ideas that people present it as. But I still think it's important that we are still there, and maybe there are some conversations that can change. I can give you one example. When they announced these new laws regarding residency and citizenship for immigrants, and that actually led to some political, let's call it, movement. And this is a very diverse movement. So I've been, for example, in the Telegram group for international professionals of freelance, and you have people who think very differently. You have people who are more conservative, people who are more liberal, people who are very concerned about specific aspects, and that's all they care about. But that's the reality of a political movement, right? You need to bring people together in some way. And I think there have been people that would not maybe agree on social media, would not be in the same bubble, but they are kindly united by this one issue that they all want to address. So in some ways, there has been also like the practice, let's say the praxis and theory are always kind of different things.
Yeah. I am basically only on like two forms of social media, and that would be right now LinkedIn and YouTube. And those are the two things that I'll be on. LinkedIn, I do appreciate for various reasons. I mean, it's practical in the sense of, for different contexts for business and for work and that sort of thing. So anything that actually can directly impact my bank account, I appreciate in that sense in a positive way. But here's the thing. I do also learn so much about things that are related to how we work. And work doesn't exist in a bubble. It's not like we have this little capitalistic cup that we exist in and then, poof, everything outside of that is the world. No, these things are very interrelated in terms of what your business does and how your business is, how it's operating. It's going to have impacts on the world and it's going to have impacts on people, right? So you have to think about those things. And I think that's just, when those things connect, I think it does make business better in that way. When you start thinking about how are we being responsible to the people that are around us. Because even if your goal is simply just to make more money, you're making more money with people. That's usually the means to which, somebody has to give you that money, right? So it's going to matter to a certain degree about those people that you are trying to extract resources from. In that sense.
Agree.
So there's no perspective where you can think about, your business without having some kind of relationship with community, with society, with human beings. I think it's a very basic thing that sometimes people will forget, but those reminders of the humanity within business, those reminders of the fact that, we exist within the world, and that has implications. I appreciate that. I think it makes us better ultimately,
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah. But you have, like I said, those different things that you're doing in your life, in your professional life, in your working as a head of growth. Do you keep like the social thing separate from that, in your actual day-to-day job? Or is it something where these things inform your everyday life? How does it work?
Yeah, so of course there are ways in which they intersect and ways in which they don't. And this comes both from internal and external. So of course, like when you're working as a global brand, we do think about these things, and we do think about, okay, what are some guidelines that we have and things that we don't want to do, no matter how much money is involved, and things that we do want to do. So there are, like, in this sense, it's a huge advantage being in a company where the brand is so central. So it does have an effect. However, I'm also like, one thing that I kind of decided to leave behind is, how do I put this? Like, I will definitely point out things that I think could be helpful, but also I've seen and I've experienced myself that, like, it's not good when, like, let's say outsiders in the heterogeneous environment take upon themselves to fix all the perceived problems inside the company. Like, let's put it this way. I don't like it when DI work is somehow something that the marginalized people in an organization take upon themselves, because the reality is it's actually not gonna help them. And it's very, like, they take so much work upon themselves and so much pressure to kind of fix these things, where in reality this should be something that comes from leadership and is done with professionals. I really don't like the trend towards kind of making basically people in the organization do unpaid DI labor. It's also one reason why I'm not a big fan of employee resource groups. And of course they have their place and they might work. But also I'm like, hey, if you are serious about DNI, pay people, put it in the OKRs. They are evaluated on, like, compensated on the DI work as well. And it's not something that they just have to do on the side. And then people, like, their managers, like, oh, but you're wasting a lot of time with this. Aren't you, like, what about your other goals? I've seen it happen. Not a fan. So in that sense, I'd rather keep these things in a way more separate. I will still, like, speak up about things that I think are important. And I have to say there are, like, very open conversations, so that's not a problem. But I also don't, I tried it to be like the internal force for change in organizations. And I'm like, no, if the leadership is the one that needs to be, we want this and we are going to put money and effort into this. Otherwise, you're just going to burn out and you're going to put yourself in a very no great place. And this is based on experience.
It's kind of funny that you say this because, all right, so I've worked with different ERGs, different companies and such, and I am agnostic towards it in terms of the format, but I wholeheartedly agree with you with this whole idea that, like, people need to be compensated for this. Like, I don't believe in, like, those employee resource groups where these are project management groups, I think when it comes to actually doing any kind of work or labor or something where you have, like, an actual, if there is a project or program that you're managing, that's not a volunteer thing. That's not something you should be, expecting anything from. I think ERGs or employee resource groups are really good for in two ways. Like, one is like a support group kind of situation. I think that's a great thing to have if you want to have, like, support communities and such. That makes sense. If you want to have it as like a consulting kind of group where people can give their opinions upwards or outwards to different people, or they can share their perspectives and their thoughts and their opinions and things to inform things, to make things better in that sense. But it's not like they have the responsibility of carrying it forward themselves, but just kind of a way of consolidating, perhaps in an anonymous way, their opinions and perspectives like that. Fantastic.
Very random.
I know. Those ones are not often, done in that way, to be honest.
I'm thinking about, like, even like a previous company that the women set up as a group for women and the CEO joined. My CEO, of course. So much for, like, open support conversations.
Yeah. So that it has to be really, really clear what it's for, because, like, let's say, for instance, I mean, I've seen a lot of CEOs who are like, hey, I want to join this minoritized group's, support group and community, because I want to show that I'm supporting them. But they don't understand.
And that's not the reason. The reason is making sure, what are you talking inside this group? I need to know. That was not the reason. It was not a supportive reason. But I, like, agree. Like, I think in general, the level of maturity often is not there into thinking more critically about these things. And I know, especially in Finland, the level of maturity of DNA inside the organization is really, really low. Like I know of companies, not everybody, but I know many companies where, the idea of D&I is like white women only, basically. Or like there is no kind of interrogation about, hey, what about our actual business? How are we making the money? Who is
Yeah.
like how are we building the product? All of these things. Very often it's we are not at this kind of level of maturity yet. However, it's improving.
Yeah.
And I also think that it needs to continue. It's this conversation needs to continue happening, and we need to keep pushing in that direction. It's not enough to just say, "Oh, this is bad, so we don't do anything about it." Of course not.
I love when I see a company that's willing to consider how do we integrate these things into our organization. I am not a person who thinks you need to have, like, for instance, a DEI person per se. I think you need to have DEI as like a process and as like an accountability with your actual organization, you know? I think it's something where it has to be part of your culture. It's like in the same way, I think it's a little bit silly to say like, this is the person who's responsible for our organization culture, or this person who's they're responsible for our organization's strategy and such. Like everybody should be doing those things. Like
I
that's
agree.
the thing that should exist throughout, you know? But to not say like everybody and actually mean nobody, you have to mean like you have accountability built in. You have to have like objectives and targets, or you have to have these guideposts. And when you realize if you go in this direction, that's not the right way, and you're gonna course correct in some ways. There has to be, and if you're doing well, you want to make certain to have some built-in rewards or incentives and such.
Yes.
I think that's kind of how that is. So if you want to make a business where you're trying to do better by all the people that you're reaching and impacting and touching, if you want to make sure that you're doing better by more people, and you want to make sure that you're consistent about that, then you have to have it integrated. It's not something that you can have one person in their little island being able to say, by the way, you should do better. That's usually not going to do anything at all.
No, it's not going to do. And then usually it's the HR person who is definitely not the person that should be doing this. So
HR needs to be in this as well. Like they definitely have a role. Like that's definitely a thing. But like if you're talking about things like, diversity and your talent acquisition is not a part of it, that's weird. If you're talking about things like diversity and your marketing and your salespeople are not a part of it, that's kind of weird. Absolutely. If you're talking about things like inclusion and, your team leads don't have any idea how to be able to welcome different kinds of people in your organization. If you don't know how to have an inclusive interview to make certain that you're not simply screening out people just because they might be like neurodiverse or have different kinds of realities, then, it's not going to fly. It's just not, So you have to make certain that everybody has some idea of, how can you work with that person next to you? How can you work with the people in your team, in your company, in your community, in your world, and the folks that you're trying to, the areas that you're trying to reach and impact? Understand those people. Make sure you're doing right by them, not just what you think you want, not just pushing something onto folks and doing it your way, specifically, exclusively, thinking about how you could do that with these people. Yeah. That's the way you have to kind of change the mentality within the working space. But that's my thoughts on it. I'm biased completely.
No, but I 100% agree with you. And there is also a spectrum between doing nothing or doing terrible things and doing amazing. Like hopefully we can kind of also find a place for, getting started and doing some things. It doesn't have to be perfect from day one.
I think incremental progress is something. In my circle, I have a lot of folks who are either like complete radicals who are like, yes, burn the system down, get rid of things and such and everything. Or the folks who are like, no, let's hold hands and such, and we'll, and pat people on the back and such, and all that, ease our way. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I think there's definitely space for like, you can do both. You can help people through what exists while you're building something completely new. I think those things can coexist. I think I would love it to not be such a political thing in terms of like within our own camp of change makers, like it has to be one or the other. I think it can actually be, Schrödinger's progress. You can have progress that takes place incrementally and radically. I think those things both have to
Yeah,
exist
and
for the.
both are needed. I think you need both people that are like absolutely, radical, knowing what they're after, and people who are willing to like kind of do this legwork on the short term gains. Like realistically, to change things, both are needed. Like it's gonna be just one or the other. And these two kind of can compensate and like push each other in different ways. Because at the end of the day, like we need, like, having this conversation is essential.
So where I fall within the camps of change makers and such, I'm a person who is oftentimes, I work with data and strategy oftentimes, and I love the interpersonal side of things. So like I haven't yet found a really good role where I can combine both these things very, very well. And I'm, if I find that, I'll jump on it certainly. But I love to be able to like, I do love the relational side of it because I think that's where you can actually see and feel and make more of it, and like that real concrete impact that you can experience that. I love that. That's just a great thing to see people's actual day-to-day lives changing. But you want to make certain that you don't just do like window dressing, like my background's in comms, by the way. So like, in comms and marketing, you have this whole thing where they'll say, hey, look, we're going to like showcase different people at certain times. We'll have like a special day. This is the day where these people matter. And the other
I hate that.
364 days,
I hate that so much.
Like I'm this weird person who, if you have a logo, I wouldn't change it for like, a particular month or something like this. I'm like, hey, you have this kind of thing, and you're going to change that, and we're going to care about these people for this month. My thought is, if your brand doesn't care about people year round, don't pretend like you care. Like
I know,
don't do it.
the
Like
hypocrisy
seriously,
is what I hate. Like,
you know.
I don't care what you do with your logo, but like, I want to see actions. And if I know that your actions don't match with your logo, I'm gonna be pissed.
Like I've seen some toxic places. Like we're gonna, like
we are gonna slap a rainbow on it, or like some other things. It's ridiculous. I hate it.
There's one company I know, they're operating, like they operate in a place literally where like it's illegal to be gay, and they get money from this place, and they don't have support necessarily for people in that place who happen to be gay. And you're gonna change your logo for pride, like like why? Why would you, like what would this even be about? What's the purpose of that? Like what are you even trying to say at that point? Yeah. So like things like this, I would rather, instead of having like those kind of shows, I want to see like, just tell me what you did. Like, how are your people doing? How are those people from that group? Like, maybe that's a good accountability point, instead of having it being like the promo point. Like, have it be the accountability point where you're like, hey, look, this group here, we have like Black History Month, instead of talking about like that, talk about, hey, these are how our Black people are doing. In fact, like they're thriving. They got this kind of thing. These are the stories, perspectives from those folks. This is how they've been growing and being supported. We have, if you have things for pride, fantastic. How are your LGBTQ plus folks doing in your organization? How are you supporting? What kind of,
your policies?
Process? What are your policies? What are your practices? What are your structures? When you have people like for accessibility, don't just have like disability day, how have you actually like built this stuff in? Talk about that. I would love to hear that. See, that's,
I 100% agree. And I think that's also like why my, like, let's say the things that I do are so much rooted in very small practical ways. So I know where I can have impact. I do that. Everything else is like, because I'm like, what is more impactful? Is like, I can offer my expertise to somebody and hopefully help them out in a practical way. Or I can like, do a lot of window dressing. So I feel like I really think like sometimes there is need for like people that are, but then it's a different thing. Like people who are activists from the words and their, like not only from the words, of course also their actions, but they are able to like move other people and like bring change and all of these things. So they're like essential, but those are usually not the CEOs.
I don't know. I think I've had a mix of CEOs in my life, where I can definitely see where a CEO can easily poison the company. Like it's very easy for a CEO to have a negative impact, much harder for them to have a positive impact. Like there's so much more work to make a positive change, than just from that person. It can't just be like, I had a nice thought and I had a good feeling, and now the world is better. Now that company,
And I think
there's a
in
lot more.
general, like, I've been thinking about this because I think so much is rooted in cult of personality. And it's the same problem that I start to see with like a lot of charismatic, let's say, political figure, right? In order to be a successful politician, you need to have some charisma. And in order to be a CEO, especially like if you're founding something new, like startups or whatever, you have to have some charisma, you have to convince others, etc. But both don't necessarily make a good leader. And there is this kind of inflection point in which it's extremely hard, especially if you are surrounded only by people that tell you how amazing you are and like you build this type of personality and everybody is supposed to worship you. And then you kind of lose the ability to interact with maybe negative feedback or like people telling you, no, this is wrong, or being able to rethink your own ideas. And I think this is in general something that is very important to keep in mind. Like, it's important to have people in your life that call you out and also maybe tell you, hey, this thing not good, or like this idea is kind of not the best. Like, and this is true for everybody, but especially when you're gonna have like a big impact. And so it's difficult because you have to be able to distinguish between bad faith criticism and actually like feedback that can help you grow and change and like be like, hey, yeah, you know what? My initial feeling is being defensive because we all feel defensive when we get criticized, and then to be able to kind of actually sit with it and think like, hey, maybe I was wrong.
I appreciate that process. I mean, for a lot of people that I know, I'm probably maybe that person. That's like the role that I might have in our interactional dynamics and such. I know a lot of really wonderful, great, stable people who are maybe averse to change in that sense. And I think I'm kind of the person who's like, well, hey, actually, have you thought about doing it maybe like this way? Like, is this really going to serve, you or your mission and what you're trying to accomplish and these kind of things? But if you're a person who's like that, if that's what your orientation is in life, to kind of always tweak and change things in that sense, then you also have to think about timing as an important thing. You have to think about how you put that message out there in a way that's going to be, impactful. And because I've definitely learned the hard way that insight without empathy is just kind of more like cruelty. There's a difference between being incisive and being cutting. And you have to make certain you are doing something in a way that is going to be productive, So it's not just about saying the thing,
I understand. And I think your point of view is definitely the best approach. But I also completely understand sometimes people are just fed up. And, they're like, why do I have to be so polite when you're being,
I mean,
saying stupid stuff? I get both points.
No, and I'm not actually, let me clarify that. Yeah. I'm not saying that you should not say the thing. No, what I'm saying is think about your purpose for what you're trying to say. Sometimes the purpose of what you're trying to say is just to let something out. Like, it might just be like, this is crap. I see this is crap. I'm fed up with the crap. I need to let this, and that is in that point a communicative purpose of venting, Fair enough. That's fine. If your purpose is to persuade, that's a whole different thing. Yeah. If your purpose is to try to change, So I think you have to think about like, what are you actually trying to do in that time? Yeah. And
I just think there is a place for rage. Let's put it this way. Maybe because of, I think I 100% agree with you. And of course, persuasion is better done with a little bit more finesse. But I also think there is a place for righteous anger.
I didn't say there's not. I think there is too. But I think righteous anger is not persuasive to me. Like, for me, if you're trying, I think the different purposes. I think that's a fantastic thing, and there is a purpose. There's a place for both of those purposes in life. And righteous anger, I am one of these weird people in life. I remember 2 times in life when I've gotten really angry, and that's it. It's a defect in me in some ways. But
I admire that so much.
No. Do not admire that. I think it is literally a defect because I remember there was once when my identity got stolen. I was so upset with that. So I had to call up everybody, all the credit agencies and all this kind of stuff to get that all sorted out. That was a mess and I hated that so much. I did get angry at that point. And another was, guy stuff, because that's horrible. But I I definitely would say, though, you have to have a certain level of positive expectation to have anger. Like, you have to feel like
Yes, that's the thing. It's a disappointment that leads to
exactly.
anger.
It's a disappointment that, and maybe my expectations in life are kind of like, like you were talking earlier, like you were so surprised that things went a certain way they went in the election. I'm like, I expected it like that. Like,
no, you're right. You're right.
And
I
so
think it's true. Like when you expect, I expect better. And then when like their minimum level is not met, I get angry. Like literally angry. So as some people have found out. So I do like in a way I am a daughter of anger, that's for sure. And it's something that on the other hand, like I 100% agree with you. Also learning that okay, if I want to impact this, getting angry is not gonna be enough. But for me, sometimes it's hard because it's like this is the truth. This is an objective truth. And how can you not see the objective truth? I'm like, that drives me a little bit insane. But also, like you cannot be angry at everything. Like there is obviously layers to this. Like there are things that deserve anger and things that are just like, well, in a way, also interested to get angry about because later it's not gonna change anything. But yeah, I learned a lot. I had this conversation a lot with my father, who is a psychologist, because he's always argued that like what matters is like the truth of what you say, not the way that you say. And then I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like if you are saying it in a way that is like, yeah, as you said, like, maybe the other person is feeling attacked, is feeling vulnerable, is feeling even scared or something, then it's not gonna really work out, no matter how true it is what you say. There is power in the anger of like somebody. Like sometimes anger is the only tool that you have, especially when you are in a position of less power.
Yeah. I do not think anybody should exist, to put their emotions in a box and lock them away. And, I don't think I will never say that. Your emotions are valid. They are really insightful. They tell you when something is wrong. Listen to that. They tell you when something is right. Listen to that, learn from it. Consider what you want to do from that and such. And then, choose your actions accordingly. But I would definitely say that, I don't know, your dad was saying like the truth behind things, the truth in things. There's a difference between truth and fact in some ways, and so he might be leaning towards like just the facts of things, right? But truth isn't just the factual thing. It's also what you say in the context. So it's not just the semantics of it, it's also the discourse in terms of which things exist. If I were to say something to you like, whoo, man, it's pretty cold out, and such, and you're sitting there by the open door, I'm actually telling you to close the door, like beyond what I've actually said. Yes, the fact is it is cold out. This is true. But what I meant to say, that, the truth, the thing that I'm actually saying is, could you close that door, please? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so there is the context in which words exist, and there's a context in which, how they're going to be received. That's also part of the truth. And so, you have to think about those things. So if you come out swinging with your words and such, someone's going to interpret that as violence against them,
and it's also like very cultural dependent, because very often people perceive me as very aggressive or harsh or like things like this, which in my opinion, I'm like, no, I'm like, you have not seen me violent. Actually, I can be violent, but I was not violent. But just it's like the expectations of communication, for example, in Finland are very different from Italy. We are a very like aggressive culture, even in affection. Like, so we have this thing is like, we express love through kind of extreme, like things that might be perceived as hate even for other people. So my communication style sometimes is perceived like, oh my God, it's just like, you are so angry, or like you are so harsh, or like you are so aggressive, or you are like even violent, like, polite, kind right now. You have no clue of what violence means.
So the context don't always match within your head and somebody else's head. And that's the weird thing. That's the thing we also have to navigate throughout life. I'm surprised any of us can pull this off, that we can exist with all these like billions of simultaneous realities that are happening right now, like in my mind and everybody else's mind in the world. And somehow we coexist, not always peacefully, obviously, but somehow we coexist with our conflicting narratives of things. But it's like we're all co-writing a story together, and
but I think
that's valuable.
This when it comes to the conversation about DNA in Finland, I think I wish there would be more like comfortable with being uncomfortable and sitting maybe with your feeling of feeling attacked instead of immediately feeling I'm feeling attacked, therefore I need to defend myself, instead of feeling like sitting with that feeling and be like, okay, why am I feeling attacked? Because that is puts such a high burden on marginalized people to have to accommodate and like smooth the edges
No. It's just like people are going to feel upset about things because there is something upsetting in what's, and that whole thing being discussed,
hungry, you can dress it up. It is pretty ugly.
And so like, and I'm always like, it's not about like trying to avoid the feeling. Don't, I'm all like, I lean into the feeling, lean into that feeling, because that's going to tell you something. If you are feeling like you're attacked by something and what people said to you was like, what you did is hurtful, is it that you're identifying with the hurt that you're causing? Are you a hurtful person? Like, what's going on there? Can you separate yourself from the action? Because if you can separate yourself from the thing that's being criticized, then you can change that thing, right? And you can make things better. But it's going to take some unpacking of like, so why do I feel so attached to this thing? Why do I feel so like, there's a lot of work
and
that
also
has to go
ignorance, to be honest. Like I feel that like a lot of it is also ignorance, and like you see, is very, if you never have experience with like talking or having understanding marginalized experiences, it's just for you, it's also like you don't know what it means, you don't know the facts, you don't know anything about it, and therefore it's like you feel attacked about some kind of concept that you have in your mind. Let's say, for example, this idea of Finland as this wonderful place where everybody's treated equally and etc. And then, you have surveys saying, hey, actually, this is an incredibly racist country. And that narrative is kind of conflict in your head, because one thing that I think, I see this a lot, especially I have to say with my fellow white women, so I put myself in this category. We don't like to think ourselves as not good people. We want to identify as good people. We tend to identify ourselves as victims because, of course, we are often victimized by patriarchy, but not always. And of course, we don't experience racism in other parts of it, right? Which is very different in addition to patriarchy. But then it's, it's very, I see this a lot, especially with white women, this inability to sit with the fact that you can be oppressed and an oppressor at the same time. You can be a victim and an abuser at the same time. You can benefit from something that also harms you. There are so many aspects to this, and I think it takes some deconstructing to kind of like understand these things and listen to people when they're talking about these things. And in general, I wish that we all were more comfortable with ambivalence and sitting with this idea where like we are all causing harm. And that's something we have to, like, we all cause harm to the world by existing and, having a phone and a computer and consuming. There are so many aspects to this, but then we go into colonialism and we go into racism and we go into so many other aspects of it. But then the point is not, who cares? I don't really care. Are you a good person or not? I care like, hey, what actions are we doing? Like, it doesn't really, the identity cannot be more important than the actions that we take.
One step I would even say, even before this, yes, we want people to be aware that our actions can create harm, because I run into so many folks who are so jaded, like the world is how it is, it's going to hell in a handbasket, it's, this kind of thing. There's nothing you can do. Let's also make certain that we can envision this a better opportunity. There are better things. There are better ways for this to be.
It's a failure of imagination.
exactly.
And I
like
put myself in that bucket because I'm also extremely nihilist, and I struggle with this. Like, it's Sicilian, we are all nihilist by blood, so it's very hard to fight against it.
like honestly, like in many ways, I kind of feel like, there are a lot of things that probably can't be changed. This is true, and there's some systems that they're running is going to run us all to the grave because that's where it wants to go, and we're happy with it going in that way to a certain degree. And a lot of people I know who are, I call them privilege minus one, or like they have different kind of privileges and such, but like a half step away from where they think is the better place to be. Those people who are mentally a half step away are one of the groups who are oftentimes very much going to reinforce that system. They can recognize that they are, marginalized in some respect. They can recognize that the system is not advantageous to them in some respect, but they can believe and envision themselves at the top. And they don't care that the system is harmful and hurtful, etc., because they can envision themselves at a point in the system where they're the ones who are not affected by that harm. But the thing is, if we can conceive the fact that A, yes, we are all affected by this harm, and B, a lot of that harm is unnecessary, that gives us some possibilities to start envisioning different actions that we could take to make things better. But I think until we have that, I have met so many people, especially like living in the inner city, people who can believe thoroughly that there's no future worth working for, and that there's nothing that you can, to do to get ahead or to do better. That, if you believe that the system is completely trash and there's nothing you can do, you're not going to work for it to be better. And then also, if you believe that, if you have a false belief in some ways that you could ever get above the harm completely, and you can game the system, you could be the smart person to make it ahead, then also you are not going to change the system in that way either. So we have to make certain we have those possibilities aligned, and then think about what are those actions that we can do concretely, each person, to make things better. Because
I agree.
otherwise,
I still think it's worthwhile. You can think that the system is not going to change. I still think it's better to wake up every day and try to do something rather than do nothing. Like, I'm very, I'm very, pessimist about the future of the world, but I'm still like, hey, if I have the choice anyway, still better to do that, little thing that I can do compared to, not do anything about it, right? So if you have the possibility to do something, it's always better to do it. There is this stupid conservative slogan like facts over feelings, whatever. I think it's super, it's so ugly and it's used in very negative ways. But in a way, what I mean is, it's better, what you're feeling is important, but you can still take action in the ways that you are able to, and that is always preferable to inaction. And this is actually what I would want people to focus more on. And I put myself, I put everybody, hey, what is the actions that we can take to improve life for everybody compared to, say, nothing can change, or not doing anything, or it's more important that I preserving my identity and my feelings compared to actually doing some action. That is the problem. I would rather people are more comfortable with us. Who cares who you are, how you feel? Just do something.
I should think, because you know what? You said facts over feelings. I would say feelings change facts, right?
Yes.
Because you need to have that feeling that, about that fact to be able to want to change it. Like, this is a horrible thing that exists. Okay, let me do something about this. This is, this is the reality that we have. I want something better. I have hope that we can make it, then let's figure out a way towards it. It's the feeling that changes the facts. They're very, very both important. And I want to see us do something better. So, my dear, 2 questions on for you.
Yes.
One is going to be, what is something you think that everybody can do better?
And
then the other one, and we'll come back to it, is what's the thing that gives you hope?
Yes.
Even though you're a nihilist.
Yes. When it comes to one thing that everybody could do, I really like to think about what individual person can feel that they can contribute. I don't think there is one action for everybody. I feel each of us have their own special ways to contributing. And we talked about this in the beginning, right? I have certain skills that make it easier and more fruitful for everybody if I do these things compared to others, because I know I can deliver the most value there to people who might need help in that sense. But I would say, anything that you can do where you see that there is an issue and you feel like I can do something with it. And then that is not just a one-off. I don't know if it's like, picking up trash while you are walking outside, or it is helping your older neighbor, or it can be volunteering at the local school, or it can be whatever it is. But I think it's very important that we get comfortable with continuous actions that are like daily actions and not just like once in a while. So that is one thing. And of course, this is like the more privileged you are, the more you can do. And the thing that gives me hope is literally like people, because as much as I don't believe in this thing that like I think systems are completely flawed, and especially because we live in a capitalist system where it's all about increasing capital over human life. But I actually think that humans are mostly fundamentally good. And most humans want fundamentally good things, like, they care about their family, they want their loved ones to be safe and happy. They want to have like dignity and basic things in life. And I think if you like, I am a nihilist on system, but I'm not a nihilist on people. I think it's always worth trying to help people, talk to people, understand other people. So that is what gives me always hope. I think like most people are good, and it's always worth fighting for them.
I love that. And I have to say then, thank you so much for being in my day to day and sharing, your perspective so I can understand more about you and the way that we approach different things. I have to say, you give a lot of joy and positive energy through your day, and I appreciate you sharing some in this direction. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you.
Honestly, my dear, I have a question. Is there any way that someone can support any of the things that you're doing? Because you do so many different things.
I'm always like, if somebody wants to help, please send me a LinkedIn message. I have a list of people I can connect you to. I can tell you like what programs you could support. There is always need for mentors, especially because my field is like international talent. So that's what I know the most. So there is always like organizations looking for mentors, which would be awesome. I am always trying to find more Finnish people that would like to mentor international talent, because there aren't enough. And it definitely helps a lot. Nowadays, unfortunately, the work situation in Finland is like the work market is really bad. So anybody who is able to like offer some supporting, like please message me. I always have a list of people that you can have.
Oh, I love that. Oh, connections, community, those are things that just add joy to my day. Thank you so very much. I hope anybody, can find you. I'll put your contact information and such to this.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great day, okay? Take care.
You too. Bye. Thank you.